What if one tweak in global payments could catapult a $2 coin into double digits overnight? And what would happen to your wallet if it does? Picture this, right? You wake up, scroll through the usual morning doom scroll, and see headlines screaming that XRP is suddenly moving hundreds of billions of dollars a day, money that used to crawl through Swift's ancient pipes. That's exactly what we're unpacking today, and trust me, by the end of this coffee chat, you'll have a brand new lens on where at least the XRP rocket might be pointing, and why that launchpad looks a lot like the dusty old Swift network that we all love to hate. So here's the story that I've been dying to share. Right, a couple of days ago, I was chatting with a friend who works at a kind of mid-tier bank in Singapore. Now he tells me, half joking, that their treasury department still kicks transactions back to a human for approval if anything looks even slightly funky. I laugh, of course, because that's Swift, right? Dinosaur DNA in 2025. But then he kind of confesses something absolutely wild. His team has started testing RippleNet for certain corridors. Why? Because on Swift, 6% of transfers get stuck in manual review purgatory, while Ripple's kind of test flow has skipped all of that drama. Now my friend is already kind of imagining a universe where Swift's kind of $5 trillion daily fire hose actually gets rerouted, even partly through XRP rails. And that nerdy little coffee chat pushed me down the rabbit hole that you and I are about to explore together right now. Let's rewind just a bit. Brad Garlinghouse, Ripple's CEO, has been poking the Swift bear since 2018, calling the legacy system slow, clunky, and so old that it should be getting spam calls about its car's warranty. Now, over the years, he's doubled down on this. At a Swiss National Bank conference in 2019, he pointed out the 6% manual intervention rate, basically saying, folks, there's millions of payments needing a human babysitter. It's not exactly the speed of the internet, is it, right? Now, then, in New York, he dropped the mic on banks' frustration with the Swift's inefficiencies and kind of painted Ripple as the rescue team rappelling down the side of a flaming skyscraper. Chris Larsen, Ripple's co-founder, kept the pressure on too. In 2020, he called Swift outdated and inefficient, like trying to send an email on a dial-up modem. Now, talk is cheap, right? But the numbers, those are just jaw-dropping. Swift handles about $5 trillion every single day, right? Now, multiply that by 260 business days a year, and you hit roughly $1.3 quadrillion. So let's think about that for a second then. Quadrillion isn't a word we kind of toss around lightly, is it? It's a planet-sized elephant in the financial room. So here comes the juicy part. Someone fired up ChatGPT, yes, yours truly did a little prompt engineering and asked, what if XRP handled just 15% of that daily Swift flow? That's around $750 billion kind of sloshing through XRP corridors, every sunrise. But to stay conservative and realistic, we sliced that flow even thinner, right? We told the bot, assume only 10% of that volume sticks around long enough to actually affect the market. So we're down to about $75 billion a day in genuine XRP demand. Let me translate that. Right now, in April of 2025, XRP changes hands at roughly around $2.07. Here or take, right? Give or take maybe a couple of cents depending on the mood swings. Now, the total kind of market cap sits near around $121 billion on a circulating supply of 58.39 billion tokens. Now, average daily trading volume, well, that's around $4.9 billion. Now, compare that to $75 billion in new kind of sticky demand. Well, we're talking about 15 times the current volume every single day. ChatGPT then applied a classic crypto metric, daily volume, as 5 to 10% of market cap. Now, crunch the math and you land on a future market cap somewhere between $750 billion and $1.5 trillion. Now, slice that by the kind of existing supply, and you end up with a price roughly of around $12.84 on the low end and about $25.68 on the high. Now, that's a 520% to 1,140% skyrocket from today's kind of sleepy $2 neighborhood. Suddenly, double digits doesn't sound like hopium, more like a kind of stat possibility. But hold up, before we all run into the street yelling XRP to the moon, let's acknowledge a problem that even my XRP loving buddy kind of sheepishly kind of admits. Adoption isn't about better plumbing, it's actually about trust, regulation, and, a little bit of luck. Now, picture trying to convince a kind of century-old bank to ditch a system that they've used since fax machines were cool. Sure, Swift is clunky, but it's very familiar. And finance people love familiar, like the way that grandma loves an ancient recipe book, right? Even if the pages are stuck together with gravy from the 80s. Digging deeper, the challenge isn't just technical, it's actually psychological. Banks kind of crave predictability. They fear headlines about a rogue crypto transfer kind of blowing up compliance reports. So Ripple's job is kind of half code, half kind of persuasion, right? Showing CFOs and regulators that on-chain settlements can be as boringly safe as Swift, only faster and cheaper. That's where Ripple's kind of incremental wins really shine. Over 300 institutions have already joined RippleNet for certain corridors. So think remittances between the Philippines and Japan, or low-value transfers out of Latin America. Each successful test closes the trust gap just a little bit more. And here's something almost nobody outside the kind of nerd bubble really talks about: liquidity hubs. Ripple's kind of pivot towards providing on-demand liquidity means banks don't need to kind of pre-fund accounts around the globe. That kind of frees up capital, a kind of euphoric moment, if you will, that makes bean counters very, very happy. Now, if you've ever tried kind of writing money or wiring money, I should say, at kind of 4 p.m. on a Friday, you get told, sorry, banking hours are over. And you know the kind of pain that Ripple is kind of selling a cure for here. Now, let's push forward with our key moment, right? Close your eyes, unless you're driving, of course, definitely don't want to be doing that. And of course, imagine tomorrow's headline, right? Global mega bank moves 15% of Swift's traffic to RippleNet, right? You refresh your price chart and XRP is sprinting like it kind of stole something. Why? Because every dollar that is kind of transferred volume either kind of passes through XRP or is captured in fees by RippleNet's other services, all of which nudge demand even higher. But here's the curveball. Even if only a fraction of that volume sticks long term, the perception shift alone can trigger a feedback loop, right? Traders front run adoption, price spikes, more headlines, more banks kick the tires, and the cycle strengthens. Kind of like the network effect that turned email from a nerdy hobby into the kind of backbone of the planet's communications. It starts slow, then suddenly you can't live without it. Let me share a tiny anecdote here, right? A few months back, I sent a test payment using a remittance app powered by RippleNet. The money crossed continents in seconds. My bank wires still kind of take 24 to 48 hours and cost more in fees than the overpriced cappuccino. Right? When you feel the difference in real life, it's hard to unfeel it, right? Imagine compliance officers and CFOs having the same aha moment at huge scale. Of course, skeptics raise, a valid eyebrow. What about regulation? What about the SEC's never-ending kind of soap opera with Ripple? And it's fair questions, right? But remember, right, how those cases evolved, right? Practical victories or partial victories, clarifications, and gradually kind of a clearer path forward. Markets love certainty, right? Every kind of milestone kind of tilts more dominoes in Ripple's favor. And if you kind of think regulators will cling to Swift just because it's old and comfy, Well, ask Blockbuster how that logic planned out. Let's zoom out to the macro view then, right? In a world where instant settlement is, table stakes, think CBDCs, think tokenized assets. The XRPL kind of sits there already kind of battle tested, decentralized and scalable, right? The alternatives is kind of like patching Swift for another decade and hoping that no one notices the kind of, I guess duct tape that's kind of piecing it all together. Now, I promise I'd circle back to that kind of 10% conversion rate that we used. Now, could it be lower? Sure. Maybe only 5% of the transactional flow translates into kind of sticky XRP demand. Even then, the price math still kind of puts us above $6, which is double, or over double today's level. On the kind of flip side, of course, if corporate treasuries decide holding XRP for a few extra hours is cheaper than kind of constantly swapping it, maybe the conversion rate is, 15 or 20%. Suddenly that $25 target looks, well, conservative. Now, before wrapping up here, quick reminder, if you want to kind of chew over these numbers in real time, join our free crypto server. There's a link in the description down below, right? We nerd out about all of these projections like it's this every single day, right? We share charts and yes, occasionally we post memes comparing Swift to dial-up internet. It's a good time. And so here's the big takeaway, right? XRP doesn't need to win the whole entire game to reshape its price. It just needs a slice, a modest 15% slice, right? Of a pie that's so enormous, it makes national GDP look like piggy banks. Now, if even a fraction of that slice sticks, the double-digit price band isn't kind of moon boy fantasy. It's simply supply and demand mathematics. Are risks real? Absolutely. Regulation, market sentiment, black swan headlines, all of these can throw the best projections into a tailspin. But ignoring the potential because of fear is kind of like refusing to buy a smartphone in 2007 because you liked your flip phone's kind of tactical buttons, right? Evolution doesn't care about your comfort zones. And now, as I kind of metaphorically kind of sip on my lukewarm coffee, I can't shake the feeling that one day we'll look back at a $2 XRP the way the early Bitcoiners reminisce about 4-digit Bitcoin. Will it happen next year? 5 years? The market decides, but the dominoes are clearly lining up. So take a breath, mull it over, and keep your wits about you. The next financial rails, are being laid as we speak, and sometimes the smartest move is just paying attention.